Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into French society,
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it should be, I think.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at it kind of through two lenses. We've got this French news magazine that gives us this snapshot of the current trends and stuff. And then we have this really cool survey of French teenagers.
Oh, very cool.
So we're going to kind of be looking at the aspirations of these young people
Right.
with kind of the backdrop of the realities, of France right now. So I think it would be a cool comparison.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they're, thinking about the world and what their hopes are for the future and see how that contrasts with, maybe some of the, realities or challenges that they might be facing.
Right. Yeah, and I think this magazine does a good job of kind of laying out some of those challenges. So why don't we start with that teen survey?
Okay, yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me from the teen survey was that only 34% of French teens
Wow.
are interested in pursuing science careers.
That's pretty low.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty surprising given, France's history with science.
Yeah, you think of like Marie Curie and all these, huge scientific discoveries that
Yeah.
come out of France. Um, but what's interesting is the survey also asked the teens about their, concerns for the future. Like, what are their top priorities?
Oh,
And it turns out that like understanding the government, finding a fulfilling career, and just being happy, like être heureux, those are their top 3 concerns.
interesting.
So, maybe it's not that they're not interested in science, but that they're just prioritizing,
Right.
other things like happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, and maybe even stability too, like
Yeah, totally.
if they're concerned about the government and trying to understand how that works.
Especially with everything going on right now politically in France, with the pension reforms and the climate protests.
Right, yeah. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So are the kids saying anything about that kind of stuff, or is it just more like generally I'm worried about the government?
Yeah. It seems to be more of a general concern about understanding how the government works, which I think is really interesting,
Yeah.
For someone like you who follows French politics closely, it would be fascinating to dive deeper into why they feel that way, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like what are they seeing or what are they hearing that's making them
Right.
kind of question those systems?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. And, speaking of the system, another thing this survey points out is that teens from more privileged backgrounds, they call them CSP+,
Okay.
are significantly more ambitious than teens from less privileged backgrounds, what they call CSP.
Interesting. So even among the young people, there's already this
Oh, yeah.
sense of, different levels of ambition based on their background.
Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks to this larger issue of social mobility in France.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even for someone who might not be super familiar with the intricacies of French society, you can immediately understand the implications of that, right? Like, are there really equal opportunities for everyone? Is the education system, which is often seen as the key to success, is it actually doing its job in leveling the playing field?
Right.
Huge questions.
Yeah, huge questions. And so amidst all this data, we have this story about this one teenager who wants to be a car mechanic,
Oh, how interesting.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it feels very different from, the kind of typical tech and AI
Right.
focus that we see so much of.
Absolutely. Like a throwback to a different era almost.
Yeah, and, but it's really cool because it shows that vocational training is still really valued in France.
Oh, definitely.
And, maybe there's this kind of resurgence of appreciation for like craftsmanship and, those kinds of skills.
Yeah, like a return to the hands-on trades, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think so. And, and it also just highlights the importance of following your passions.
Yeah.
Even if it's different or maybe doesn't seem like the most obvious choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like forge your own path.
Exactly. Okay, so let's move on from the dreams of youth and let's look at like the realities of adult life in France.
Okay, let's get real.
And we have this graphic in the magazine that compares housing costs across different European countries.
Oh, interesting.
And France stands out.
Yeah.
With a large portion of household income going towards housing, like 31%.
Wow, that's a big chunk.
Yeah, it is. What are some of the factors that contribute to these high housing costs in France?
Well, urbanization is a big one. As more and more people move to the cities, demand for housing goes up and prices naturally rise.
Makes sense, yeah.
It's basic economics, but with real-world consequences for people's wallets, right?
Totally. So is there anything the government is doing to kind of
That's a great question.
address that?
Yeah.
Or is it just kind of like, yeah, this is a complex issue?
Let the market decide. Yeah. It's a complex issue. There are various policies in place, but it's an ongoing debate.
Okay.
How to balance market forces with affordable housing.
Right. The magazine also mentioned this tunnel construction project under the Dunkirk airport.
Under the airport. That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really strange.
What's the purpose of that?
Well, they didn't really go into detail, but it made me wonder if France is like investing in infrastructure to try to boost their economy.
It could be. Yeah, infrastructure projects like that can definitely stimulate economic growth,
Right.
create jobs and attract businesses. So it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, like building pathways for the future.
Literally, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Speaking of the future, let's talk about another trend that's shaping life in France: fast fashion.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
The magazine highlights a kind of surprising fact.
Yeah,
The Chinese fast fashion giant Shein.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're now the #1 clothing retailer in France.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the reasons behind Shein's success?
Well, their clothes are super affordable, and they've really mastered the art of online shopping and marketing, especially to younger generations.
Yeah.
They're really good at tapping into those trends and making it easy for people to buy.
Totally, yeah. But this kind of success also brings up the issue of sustainability.
Oh, absolutely.
The environmental costs of fast fashion are pretty undeniable at this point.
Yeah, it's a huge concern.
So how do we balance this desire for affordable fashion with the need to be more responsible and sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
I think consumers are becoming more aware of the impact of their choices, but it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Totally. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Hmm.
We looked at everything from the anxieties and aspirations of French teens
Yeah.
to like the economic realities and the cultural trends that are shaping their lives.
Yeah. And how those anxieties and aspirations kind of intersect with, these bigger societal trends.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been
Yeah.
really fascinating.
Makes you think about the future, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a French teenager today, knowing all of this?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I guess I would encourage them to stay engaged, stay informed about the issues that matter to them,
Right.
and to never be afraid to question the status quo and to fight for the future they want to see.
That's really good advice.
And I think that applies to all of us, really, no matter where we live.
Yeah, absolutely.